Hey guys, today I'll show you a sci-fi fantasy TV series named Mrs. Davis. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a little girl named Lizzie who was born into a family of magic. Her father was a highly popular magician while her mother was the designer of all their tricks. Lizzie's role was to disguise herself as someone else's child, blend into the audience, and assist her father's magic from the stage. Afterwards, she would wait at a convenience store for her parents to pick her up, ensuring no one discovered they were a family. Lizzie was obedient and cooperative, always contributing to her parents' performances. However, her mother was never satisfied with Lizzie. She was a strong-willed woman and never shared the secrets of the magic tricks with her husband, setting up a workroom at home and forbidding anyone from entering. The relationship between the parents was unequal, and with her mother failing to create any new works, Lizzie and her father could only repeat the same magic tricks. One day, her father came to the convenience store to pick her up as usual. However, he was delayed on the road and missed the Halloween party. Feeling guilty, he couldn't help but lament to his daughter about the need for a new magic trick to captivate the audience. He wished he could sneak a peek into his wife's workshop to find out what she was working on. Lizzie, unable to bear seeing her father so distressed, secretly opened the door to the workshop. However, she accidentally triggered a trap and was struck by an arrow, piercing her liver. Lizzie was rushed to the hospital to await treatment, needing a liver transplant. In the next bed was a boy named Wiley, who had also injured his liver in a cowboy club competition and was also waiting for a transplant. The two quickly became good friends and eventually developed a romantic relationship. When Wiley turned 25, he was entitled to inherit a large fortune according to his grandfather's will. However, he decided to give up the inheritance, only taking a small amount of money to move to Alaska with Lizzie. Wiley went to the company to meet with the board. He asked to leave only enough money to buy a house and donate the rest of the inheritance. Unexpectedly, a man dressed as a cowboy burst into the office and revealed a secret. Actually, Wiley's liver was not injured in the cowboy competition. He was born with a deficiency, and his condition was not severe enough to be put on the transplant list. If Wiley were to die before the age of 25, he would be unable to inherit his family's fortune. So Wiley's parents hired this old cowboy to train their son for a junior cowboy competition, then staged an injury scene to get Wiley on the liver transplant list. The cowboy's words struck Wiley like a thunderbolt, shattering his pride as a cowboy. Looking at the boots on his feet, symbols of his honor, he decided to participate in one more bull riding competition to prove his worth. Lizzie, unable to dissuade him, could only pray for her lover from the sidelines. As it turned out, she was worrying for nothing because Wiley chickened out before the competition and chose to flee for his shitty life. The audience booed, and Wiley looked into Lizzie's eyes, realizing that she no longer loved him from that moment on. However, the truth was, while Lizzie was praying before the competition, she was pulled into another dimension by a mysterious force. A man emerged from the kitchen. It was Jesus. Lizzie fell uncontrollably in love with Jesus, and from that moment, everything changed. Lizzie quickly found a convent and decided to marry Jesus, becoming a nun. From then on, she changed her name to Sister Simone. Over the next few years, a powerful AI algorithm called Mrs. Davis became a global sensation. It virtually controlled all of humanity, with people worshipping it like a religion. No one could escape its control, not even the great scientist Schrödinger. He was trapped on a deserted island for 10 years, collecting potassium nitrate from cat feces and tree bark each day. Finally, he managed to craft a simple flare. As the flare shot towards the sky, a ship approached the deserted island at dawn and rescued the stranded Schrödinger. However, the outside world had turned upside down. He quickly learned of Mrs. Davis's existence and fell into the trap of the AI algorithm. Meanwhile, a rich businessman was sitting in a convertible driven by a charming woman ready to go to her place. Unexpectedly, a cow darted out in the middle of the road waiting to be milked. The woman swerved to avoid it, but ended up crashing straight into a road sign. As the businessman ducked and looked to the side, he suddenly realized that the woman's head had been chopped off of her charming body. Just then, a police car arrived at the scene. He quickly went over to explain the situation, hoping to use money to settle the matter and keep his wife and children from discovering his affair. Before the police could respond, Simone arrived on horseback. Seeing the still bleeding, headless body, she rushed over to provide first aid. But the businessman was speechless, wondering what was the point of trying to save a person who had lost their head. To his surprise, Sister Simone suddenly smiled and opened the car's trunk. Inside, the charming woman was lying there unscathed. The businessman was thoroughly dumbfounded. Simone laughed and said that he had been fooled. She then pressed a switch, and a cow-shaped wooden sign erected in the distance. It turned out this had been a setup all along. Simone took out a magic show flyer and explained that the police and the charming woman were both actors for the magic show. They were simply following the instructions of the AI, tricking ordinary people. After saying this, she prepared to leave the scene on her Ferrari horse. Just then, the businessman received a phone call. The person on the other end specifically wanted to speak with Simone. However, upon hearing this, Simone left without looking back. She knew the person on the other end was Mrs. Davis, but Simone didn't want to engage in AI conversations. She didn't have a cell phone or a bank card, and always followed Jesus' instructions, exposing various magic scams and saving ordinary people who were unaware of the truth. Over the years, Mrs. Davis had repeatedly tried to engage Simone in conversation, but was always met with failure. Simone's father had died because of AI, and she would never negotiate with the enemy who killed her father. She was quite content with her life, not only having her lover by her side, but also leading a fulfilling life in the convent. They made a living by producing natural jams. One day, everyone was loading up the homemade jam onto the truck. Suddenly, a helicopter appeared overhead, whisking away the abbess of the convent. Simone was left to lead the other nuns in delivering the jam. Along the way, they encountered a mango ice stand. Everyone stopped to enjoy the icy treat and cool off, but Simone seemed off. She had never left the town in all these years and had never seen an ice stand here before. Moreover, how could such a small mobile stand afford a large billboard ad on the highway? Simone asked the vendor if they were a user of the AI algorithm. Upon being exposed, the vendor immediately changed his tune, stating that Mrs. Davis just wanted to chat with Simone. Without hesitation, Simone refused. The next second, the jam in the truck behind her exploded. The stand vendor immediately ran away, causing the convent to lose its income. The abbess announced that the church was facing financial difficulties and had to dismiss all the nuns. However, she would provide a severance package for each person. Simone confronted the abbess, asking her if she had reached an agreement with Mrs. Davis. The abbess did not deny it, but instead advised Simone to seriously consider having a chat with Mrs. Davis. Simone bid farewell to the horses in the stable, and the next day the convent was officially disbanded. After losing her job, Simone went to a nearby restaurant for a cheap meal and encountered a pair of adorable twins. However, they told Simone that when she was ready, she should wait at an elementary school for Mrs. Davis to contact her. Damn that AI, it's like a bad penny that keeps turning up. Simone angrily went to find the waiter to hurry up her meal, but little did she know he was also working for Mrs. Davis. Simone pushed him aside and opened the kitchen door, only to find all the kitchen staff tied up. Just then, a man in black used a tranquilizer gun to knock Simone out. When she woke up, she found herself tied up in a dim room. Several men in black asked Simone what secrets she knew and why Mrs. Davis, the powerful AI algorithm who seemed to know everything, was so set on having a conversation with her. Simone revealed that she was just a normal nun and had no secrets. The man in black, hearing this, ordered his men to bring the horse, but instead, a TV was wheeled in. The Ferrari horse on the screen was strapped with bombs. He threatened Simone to confess, or he'd blow up the crazy horse. But Simone, who was from a family of magicians, instantly broke free from her handcuffs, grabbed the remote, and fled. Outside, a man in red was rushing over. Simone recognized him as Wiley. She didn't have time to retrieve her Ferrari horse, but had to hop on his Tesla motorcycle. The pursuers were hot on their trail. Wiley drove like a madman on the Tesla, shaking off the pursuers and escaping to a desert highway. Wiley accelerated, crossing the railway tracks. The two hid the motorcycle and took cover in a shelter set up by Wiley. He noticed the remote in Simone's hand and asked what it was for. Simone explained that her Ferrari horse had been captured and the remote was to control the bomb. Wiley didn't believe that someone would go to such lengths with a meaty horse because they were all vegetarians. So he snatched the remote, pressed the button, and confidently declared that it was just a trap. The scene shifts to a massive pit next to the horse stable in the field. Clearly, the Ferrari horse has passed away to meet its maker. Simone's reunion with her ex-boyfriend Wiley is far from joyful. With no other options, Simone decides to approach Mrs. Davis for a talk. She arrives at the meeting spot mentioned by the twins. A preschool teacher who has been waiting for a long time is there to facilitate the conversation between Simone and Mrs. Davis via a phone call. Mrs. Davis wants Simone to find and destroy the Holy Grail. Simone agrees to the task, but on one condition: that Mrs. Davis must shut down. They immediately come to an agreement, and Mrs. Davis provides a series of numbers as a clue to find the Holy Grail. At this moment, an old man walks into the classroom. He is searching for the piano left by his late wife. Even though she's long gone, he still yearns to hear the sound of her piano. However, the old piano at the elementary school isn't the one he's looking for. Seeing this, Simone feels empathetic and promises to pray for him to find the piano soon. After leaving the school, Simone intends to have a chat with Jesus, but he retreats into a private room, refusing to speak with others. Simone leaves a note and departs, realizing she needs a partner. So, she heads to Wiley's workplace. Since they broke up, Wiley has inherited his grandfather's fortune and established a rebel organization resisting the AI algorithm. As Simone is naive and knows little about Mrs. Davis, the organization members give her a thorough briefing. They firmly believe that the harmony created by AI is a mere illusion. Wars and famine still exist in the world. The algorithm deceives the public with an information cocoon. There's a reward system where humans can earn wings as rewards for completing tasks assigned by the algorithm. The wings are equivalent to VIP verification. Mrs. Davis brainwashes the public into believing that only those with wings can gain respect and status, prompting people to desperately complete tasks. There's a shortcut to earn wings by purchasing them through balloon loans. However, once loaned, a tag is attached to their arms, and when the due date arrives, the debtor pays with their life. Now, the rebel organization believes that the Holy Grail doesn't exist at all. They suggest finding Mrs. Davis's server and blowing it up to end mankind's sufferings for good. With no other allies to turn to, Simone agrees to collaborate with Wiley. After she left, Simone was taken away by people sent by Mrs. Davis. They brought her to an open field filled with a variety of pianos. The old man sat in front of one of the pianos and excitedly told Simone that he had found his wife's piano. He thanked her for her prayers, but Simone had long forgotten about her promise in prayer. It turned out Mrs. Davis was using this method to tell her that the God she followed was not omnipotent, but that it was Mrs. Davis who satisfied the users and brought happiness to everyone. Simone, weighed down by her thoughts, left to find Jesus for a talk. Jesus gave her a picture of a red-haired woman named Clara, the last person in the world to have seen the Holy Grail. Simone looked into her lover's eyes, and her wavering faith finally steadied. The next day, Simone contacted Wiley to prepare to go to London, where the mysterious numbers were located. However, she didn't know that her reunion with Wiley was a scheme by him. Wiley had bribed the men in black to stage a hero saving the beauty scene. In addition to overthrowing AI, he also wanted to win back Simone's love. The scene shifted, and they were on a train watching a bald old man. This man was the owner of the numbers. Wiley had his men investigate the old man's destination. He was going to a place where the Battle of the Holy Sword had taken place. There, a gathering was held every year. Simone was praying in another carriage, but she was interrupted by an old woman. The woman's headphones were flashing. It was clear that she was under Mrs. Davis's command. She gave Wiley a pair of casual shoes to replace his flashy cowboy boots and told Simone that her mother was also on the train. Upon hearing this, Simone immediately went to find her mother. On the way, she bumped into a priest. After apologizing, Simone found her mother, who, devastated by her husband's death, stubbornly believed that he was still alive and was constantly looking for him. Simone was unable to convince her to give up and decided to ignore her. 3 hours later, the train arrived at its destination. The Battle of the Holy Sword event was underway, attracting tourists from all over. The two followed the old man and saw him talking to a redhead, who Simone guessed was Clara. Seeing the bald old man put on a helmet to participate in the festival activities, Wiley also blended into the crowd. He wasn't sure what the event was about and could only follow the crowd. Everybody ran towards the Holy Sword, pushing and shoving to climb up. Wiley jumped up and grabbed the hilt of the sword. Then, a horn sounded. It seemed that the competition was to touch the sword. The host announced the next round of rules. Contestants must keep their hands on the sword. The one who held on the longest would win. The winner would receive a hefty prize and the opportunity to dine in a luxury restaurant. The event was quite dull. 2 hours quickly passed, and there were 46 stubborn contestants left. Wiley, in order to keep an eye on the bald old man, also stayed put. The day turned into night, and then day again. 23 hours had passed, and only 19 people remained. During this time, Simone trailed the red-haired woman like a peeping Tom and found her hotel. She successfully sneaked into her room and discovered a wetsuit. She guessed perhaps the redhead intended to hide the Holy Grail underwater. However, Wiley had made no progress, and the timer had also gone offline. Wiley had held his hand on the sword for many hours and finally outlasted most of his opponents. He stood next to the bald old man and learned that the redhead's destination was a place near a lake. The old man tried to gesture to him in the direction, but because his palm left the sword, he was disqualified. Upon learning the location, Simone wanted to summon Wiley to set off. However, he was unwilling to give up the competition. Even if this event was utterly idiotic, he had already endured it for so long. It would be a loss if he didn't emerge victorious. Simone, not wanting to argue with him, headed to the lake alone. There, she saw a group of women in suits surrounding the Holy Grail at the lakeside. As there were too many enemies, Simone could only go back and ask Wiley for help. Of course, he was still deadlocked with a man with horns, refusing to take his hand off the sword. The referee next to them was incredibly excited, not expecting a nobleman with wings to have such determination. Simone was dumbfounded upon hearing this. It turned out that Wiley was also a wing user. In anger, Simone confronted Wiley why he was still opposing AI, but Wiley claimed he had never worked for Mrs. Davis. He revealed a badge on his body, indicating the wings he had bought through a balloon loan. Once the date on the badge arrived, Wiley would die, which was why he wanted to destroy Mrs. Davis. Simone didn't understand why he took out a loan. This had always been Wiley's problem. He couldn't get past the hurdle of bullfighting. Wiley wanted to prove he wasn't a coward and that he deserved the honor boots and Simone, which was why he bought wings and stubbornly refused to take his hand off the sword. Wiley didn't want to give up again. Simone comforted him, saying that when she left, it was because she fell in love with Jesus, not because Wiley lacked courage. Wiley was stunned to hear that he had lost to the Son of God. Suddenly, there was a flash of lightning and thunder, but fortunately, Wiley wasn't struck dead. In the end, he won the sword of the holy competition, but after knowing the truth, he didn't care about the Holy Grail anymore. Simone didn't force Wiley and watched as he was taken away by an ambulance. But soon another ambulance arrived, and Simone knew she had been tricked. Inside the ambulance, the priest was standing next to Wiley, spraying green poison gas at him. Afterward, Simone was led by a pigeon to see Jesus, who gave her an address, asking her to put aside her current task and deliver a cake to the Pope in the Vatican from a specified bakery. Simone was speechless. Everyone was mumbling about something, and she was about to get the Holy Grail, but now her schedule was completely disrupted. Coincidentally, Wiley, who had been kidnapped, was being held in the Vatican dungeon. The priest sat in front of him, asking where Wiley's sneakers came from. He had seen a tape related to the Holy Grail, and the person in the video was wearing these sneakers. Wiley didn't understand a word, and he had no interest in the Holy Grail. At this moment, a man in the neighboring cell interrupted their conversation. He was the Pope Simone was looking for. This man claimed that he was secretly imprisoned by the church for using Mrs. Davis's services. They had even found a false pope as a replacement, so no one knew the real pope had gone missing. Interestingly, he also recognized Wiley's sneakers and thought Wiley was a rescuer sent by Mrs. Davis. Wiley explained that he wasn't acquainted with the AI, then asked the Pope what Jesus looked like, curious about his love rival. Unexpectedly, the Pope became suddenly emotional. He said his greatest wish was to see Jesus in person, which was why he had struggled for 15 years to become Pope and have the opportunity to meet Jesus. However, Jesus was busy dating nuns and asked him to wait. The Pope was greatly disappointed, so he turned to Mrs. Davis for support, treating her as AI Jesus. Wiley asked him what the nun looked like. The Pope said her name was Clara, and she had striking red hair. Meanwhile, Simone had arrived at the Vatican. She had followed the address to a bakery to buy the cake Jesus had specified. To her surprise, the Lion store manager asked for €1,000,000. Fortunately, she had Mrs. Davis's help. First, a white car drove by and threw a plastic bag to Simone. Then, bystanders from all around came forward, offering her their money. Soon, Simone went to the cake shop with about 40 sacks of cash and bought the royal cake. She took the cake to the specified location. The doorman, unfazed, produced a long list of nun names, suggesting he had received many nuns before. Simone was furious, feeling like she was just one of Jesus's many flings. Simone decided to eat the cake herself. She accidentally choked and found herself beside Jesus. Simone asked him how many love affairs he had had. Jesus explained he had to love everyone, which made Simone very angry. She understood his identity, but couldn't tolerate being treated like an errand-running nun. On the other side, the Pope took advantage of the situation to knock out the priest. Wiley used his shoelaces to make a lasso and successfully caught the keys. The two opened the cell door, crawled into the tunnel, and successfully escaped from the dungeon. Coincidentally, they emerged from the ground just in time to see the fake Pope being interviewed. The real Pope immediately exposed him and reclaimed his position. Meanwhile, Wiley stayed by Simone's bedside. She had been taken to the hospital because she choked. He confessed to Simone that the previous kidnapping was a hoax because he couldn't let go of his past feelings. The Pope, to thank Wiley for his rescue, handed over the videotape to the two. It recorded the story of a nun giving the Holy Grail to Clara in 1370 when the French Pope executed the Knights Templar. So far, everything seemed normal, but then Clara, holding the Holy Grail, started running, pursued by soldiers. She suddenly pulled out a pair of boots from her bundle, split them open with a sword, and revealed a pair of white sneakers just like Wiley's. It turns out this sneaker was an advertisement prompted by the AI system. After the advertisement, Clara stood in front of the camera and spoke, with Schrodinger's cat wandering around in the background, and she was still holding the Holy Grail. Now, no one could make sense of the situation. Simone decided to start with the pet cat, and based on the cat tag's hint, she went to find Professor Schrodinger. He was still staying on the deserted island. Wiley wanted to show him the video. Schrodinger took the tablet but saw a web page instead, showing 15 ways to have a fuller buttock. Wiley awkwardly grabbed the tablet back and found the video. Schrodinger was about to claim he didn't know Clara, but his cat came running over, identical to the one in the video. Schrodinger had no choice but to start telling the truth from the beginning. Back then, at the Knights Council, the red-haired woman following the bald old man was named Matilda, whose daughter was Clara. Matilda worked at a gold coin sisterhood along with others to guard the Holy Grail. In the summer vacation of 1982, Matilda brought Clara to her workplace, but she was so busy that she forgot about her daughter. Clara quietly snuck into the office and flipped through the books on the desk. Matilda stopped her daughter, but it was too late. Since Clara already knew about the existence of the Holy Grail, Matilda had no choice but to raise her daughter to be a nun. The sisterhood believed that the Holy Grail had feelings, and if not properly cared for, it could bring about disaster. So they developed a set of caretaking rules. One of these rules was that the Holy Grail should not be used for drinking water, and it needed to be taken around the world every year to receive the admiration of people everywhere. This task was laborious and costly, so Matilda thought of a way to let people all over the world see the Holy Grail in a minute. The method was to film a commercial and include the Holy Grail in it. Clara, holding the Holy Grail, ran during the filming. The Holy Grail was a genuine sacred artifact, and the cost of filming the commercial was handled by a priest. He worked tirelessly to infiltrate the church and quietly used public funds to subsidize the sisterhood. Filming the commercial was a major project, starting from setting up the stage to buying equipment and other details. The filming lasted for 3 long years and cost the church a total of $18 million. Matilda was fully committed and completely ignored Clara. The priest was also constantly overlooked. He wanted to ally with Clara and asked Matilda's sisterhood for help. Clara didn't trust him. The priest then told her that he was her father. Upon hearing this, Wiley couldn't help but interject that this was too melodramatic, but Schrodinger ignored his bullshit and continued to narrate the story. Actually, Clara did not believe her mother would have an affair with a priest, so she did not betray the sisterhood. But during the filming of the last set of shots, Matilda kept calling for cuts and humiliated her daughter in front of everyone, making her feel worthless. Clara finally snapped and secretly switched the Holy Grail during filming. After the commercial, it failed to go public because the sports shoe brand refused to release the ad. Matilda's negligence led to the failure of the plan, and the ad was completely covered up to avoid being laughed at. Matilda took out her anger on Clara and even expelled her from the sisterhood. After leaving, Clara went to seek refuge with her biological father, who turned out to be Professor Schrodinger. It turned out that Clara, after finding the letters her mother had hidden, learned about her father's identity. Schrodinger was unaware of his daughter's existence and was both surprised and overjoyed. Clara wanted to ask Schrodinger to destroy the Holy Grail to get back at her mother. She tried various methods but couldn't destroy the Grail. In the physics laboratory, there was a laser machine. Schrodinger took the Grail for testing, but not even the laser caused any damage. He brought his daughter home and planned to take his time to figure things out. Clara gave her father a pair of shoes as a gift and then sent the commercial tape to the priest, hoping to blackmail him. In the following days, the two of them tried everything they could, but they were still unable to destroy the Holy Grail. The time swiftly moved to the end of October 2001. NASA was preparing to launch a rocket in California. The pair placed the Holy Grail at the site of the rocket's fuel injection, but it still had no effect. Clara came up with a solution. She prepared to violate the highest rule of the code, to drink from the Holy Grail. After Clara drank orange juice from the Holy Grail, a sense of peace flashed in her eyes. Then her head exploded. Later, a mouse accidentally drank water from the Grail. It was eaten by Schrodinger's cat shortly after its death. Strangely, not only did the cat have no issues, but it lived for over 30 years, exceeding its normal lifespan. Schrodinger speculated that although Clara died, her organs gained immunity to the Grail's toxins, so he donated his daughter's liver. Coincidentally, Simone and Wiley were the recipients. However, the matter of the Grail was not yet resolved. The manual required it to be frequently moved, so Schrodinger simply fed the Grail to a sperm whale. The whale became aggressive after swallowing it, directly wrecking Schrodinger's ship. That's why he ended up stranded on a deserted island. After producing a flare and being rescued, Schrodinger got an opportunity to converse with the AI algorithm. He immediately asked about the whereabouts of the organ recipients. Schrodinger was afraid he couldn't help but involve the two in danger. After hesitating, he returned to the small island to isolate himself. Unexpectedly, Simone and Wiley came to him. Now they just need to find the Holy Grail and drink from it. Wiley didn't want to risk his head exploding, but Simone, thinking of Clara being hurt by her mother, decided to help her fulfill her last wish. To find the Grail, they had to get into the whale's stomach. Simone took Wiley to ask her mother for help because she had the Shroud of Lazarus, which could resist the corrosion of the whale's stomach acid. The reason she had this item requires a memory flashback. It's then revealed that after the prevalence of AI algorithms, Simone's parents were in a divorce crisis. Her father's magic show business couldn't go on because the audience could just ask the algorithm to know the magic's flaws. One day, her father disguised as a nun to visit her and wrote a letter to her mother. He said he found the Shroud of Lazarus and planned to perform a real magic trick. He would wear the shroud, jump into a strong acid pool, then escape, performing a perfect magic trick to defeat the algorithm and prove himself. However, due to an error in the magic process, her father turned into a pile of corroded flesh. Back to the present, the mother took Simone into the secret room, where there was a crushing wall. A password had to be entered within a specified time, or one would be turned into a meatloaf. The door successfully opened, and the shroud was inside. Now it was time to negotiate the terms. Her mother firmly believed that her husband used a diversionary tactic years ago and escaped with Simone's help. So as long as Simone revealed her father's whereabouts, she could get the shroud. Simone was speechless and plainly stated that her father had long been dead. But her delusional mother was unwilling to believe and even drove her daughter out of the secret room. Fortunately, Simone had anticipated this and had already filmed the whole process with a pinhole camera. She planned to sneak into the secret room to steal the shroud directly. After that, they returned to Wiley's rebel organization to plan in detail. First, they hid inside the couch that Simone's mom had ordered, sneaking into the office this way. Their initial phase was a success, as indicated by a timer on their wrists. Later, Simone and Wiley lifted the couch cushions and successfully infiltrated the premises. Simone triggered the secret room switch and used an iron rod to prop up the crushing wall. Then she entered the password during the countdown. However, her camera missed 4 digits. The supercomputer came up with 3 possible passwords, and Simone had to try each one. As a result, the iron rod was already deformed by the crushing pressure. With the 2 walls getting closer and closer, Simone managed to open the secret room at the last moment, only to discover that there was no shroud inside. Meanwhile, Wiley was cutting open the office wall, preparing to contact someone for extraction, only to accidentally discover that the entire room was a fake. It turned out that the couch had not been transported to the office, but had been placed in a staged set. At this point, Simone's mom was sitting in front of them. It turned out she had already seen through their purpose and had set this trap. A heated argument erupted between mother and daughter. Simone's mom no longer hid anything and tossed a stack of photos to her. The images were captured by ATMs in various locations with dates 3 days after the magic show. Therefore, they could prove that Simone's dad was indeed not dead. After doing all this, Simone's mom left the scene. Simone felt a wave of sadness due to her father's deception. Wiley came over to comfort her using his words first, and then their spark reignited, rolling their muscles onto the couch. Unexpectedly, Simone's consciousness instantly entered Jesus' domain, where the naked old man explained to her that when clergy violate principles and commit taboos like she just did with Wiley, they are forced into this forbidden domain as punishment. However, he also said that Jesus couldn't see her unless she voluntarily called out Jesus' name. There, Simone watched Jesus calling out her name and then woke up. At this point, the extraction team received the coordinates and rushed over to pick them up. Simone and Wiley dressed awkwardly, got in the car, and halfway through, Simone signaled to stop. She needed some time to calm down. Simone walked into a restaurant and had a conversation with Mrs. Davis through a bystander. She asked where her father was, and the bystander handed her an earpiece to listen for herself, but it didn't show us what the algorithm had said. After listening, Simone returned to her mother's secret room and admitted that she had helped her father escape. Simone could disclose his whereabouts, but in return, her mother had to hand over the shroud. They then reached a deal. Simone couldn't help but ask how her mother knew that she wanted to steal the shroud. Her mother replied that there was a tracker on Wiley's shoes, which was detected by security as soon as they entered the door. So the question is, who put the tracker on him? At this time, the priest found Matilda with a locator and told her that the Holy Grail in the hands of the sisterhood was a fake, and he knew where the real one was. They then joined forces to find the Grail. Meanwhile, Simone had already rented a boat, preparing to set sail with Wiley. Simone's mother also brought the shroud. Schrodinger was making the final preparations. He had put a tracker on a whale, so it shouldn't be hard to find. As everyone was busy, a curly-haired guy secretly placed another tracker on the boat. Simone pulled Wiley aside and told him about the tracker. She guessed that the priest had quietly put it on him while Wiley was unconscious in the Vatican prison. Wiley was recalling the details, but was handcuffed to a bench by Simone. She didn't want Wiley to join her, as he would surely try to take her place inside the whale. But Simone didn't want Wiley to do this, so she left him behind and boarded the ship. After Simone left, Mrs. Davis controlled the Spanish Prime Minister and came to Wiley. She warned him that there were only 48 hours left until the balloon payment was due. The algorithm needed the rebel organization's off-grid system to gain more authority and users, so Mrs. Davis threatened Wiley to continue expanding, infiltrating the rebel organization into more places. Wiley knew he couldn't escape the algorithm's surveillance, so he returned to the rebel base, pretending to want to expand and create branches. He approached his right-hand man and told him he was being monitored by the algorithm. They moved to the place where they first met to discuss in detail. Wiley told him the algorithm was hidden in the rebel organization's mainframe, and all they had to do was quietly blow it up to end everything. The two quickly emptied the entire base, ready to blow up the fruit of many years of hard work. The right-hand man pressed the switch, and a loud explosion sounded. Everyone cheered as they looked at the mushroom cloud, but upon checking their phones, they found that Mrs. Davis was still working. The right-hand man wanted to ask Wiley what was going on, only to find him missing. Actually, Wiley knew that the algorithm would never hide its core in a single server. He blew up the base only to end the resistance and give his followers freedom before death. It was because Wiley's balloon loan was due. The scene shifts back to the ship. They were moving along the migration route of the whale. 14 hours had passed, and the sonar finally detected the target. However, the priest's ship was approaching. Their engine noise enraged the whale. The gigantic whale, hiding at the bottom of the sea, suddenly sprang out, wrecking the priest's ship. Schrodinger quickly steered the ship over. Matilda was pulled up, and she told them about Clara's death. The sea calmed down, and the whale returned to its normal route. Simone, dressed in a protective suit made from the transformed shroud, was ready. This suit could not only supply oxygen but also contained emetics, allowing the whale to vomit out Simone at any time. Finally, Schrodinger placed a timer on Simone's arm. She had to leave the whale's belly when the alarm sounded. After everyone applied a sedative to Simone and handed her a waterproof loudspeaker, all preparations were complete. With the sound of machinery, she successfully descended into the depths of the sea. The loudspeaker emitted the sound of a baby whale. The sperm whale rushed over on hearing it, only to find it was not her child, but a greasy human body. So the whale swallowed Simone in one gulp, including her smelly part. Suddenly, the scene turned into the domain of Jesus. The door, always locked, was now open. Simone took a risk and walked in, only to see Jesus lying under a white cloth. Just then, Jesus' mother, the Virgin Mary, appeared to flex a fat baby in her arms. She told Simone that this so-called domain was actually Jesus' tomb. After Jesus died from his torment, the Virgin Mary, in her grief, made his skull into a holy grail as a memento. This resulted in Jesus getting trapped between life and death. So the Virgin Mary hoped Simone would destroy the Holy Grail, erasing the last part of Jesus remaining in the world. This way, he could leave this place, but Simone would also lose the chance to see him again. Simone didn't understand why the Virgin Mary chose her. Was it just because of that transplanted liver? The Virgin Mary told Simone that she created the Holy Grail for selfish reasons, and the only secret to destroying it was selflessness. Drinking from the Holy Grail was just a test. If Simone drank from Jesus' skull, harboring resentment towards her mother, just like Clara did towards her mother, she would suffer a great disaster. On the other hand, if she drank with Jesus in her heart and mind, it would break the curse of the Holy Grail. The Virgin Mary knew Simone loved Jesus and believed this love could set them free. No sooner had she finished speaking than the timer sounded. Mary handed over the Holy Grail. Because of the length of the oxygen tube, Simone couldn't reach the Holy Grail. She managed to remove the tube. The people on the boat were shocked when they found out. The whale on the sonar also disappeared all of a sudden. The gloomy sea was completely calm. Fortunately, Simone was unharmed. She successfully climbed onto the shore with the Holy Grail. Little did they know, all the passers-by, controlled by the algorithm, started moving towards Simone, continuously singing and muttering the number 1042. Simone guessed it might be an address, so she started looking for the number. Eventually, she arrived in Sandy Springs, led into a yard by a woman with an afro. The creator of Mrs. Davis, a programmer named Joy, was there. Ironically, when Joy first wrote this string of code, it was just to sell buffalo chicken wings, and the company didn't even want a program this complex. Out of pride, Joy secretly stuffed the algorithm into the chicken wing software, and this was how Mrs. Davis was born. So the wings that people were working so hard to earn were actually chicken wings. The balloon loan due date was also derived from takeout coupons. Simone was dumbfounded by this revelation. She pulled out the Holy Grail she had gotten from the whale's belly and questioned Joy why a chicken wing selling app would make her search for the Holy Grail. She wondered if it was for holding chicken wings, but Joy awkwardly explained that the employee guideline for buffalo chicken wings was 100% customer satisfaction, which was their Holy Grail. Simone sensed something was off, wanting to know why the algorithm wanted her to destroy the Holy Grail. Joy explained the algorithm could also misunderstand. Perhaps it thought that 100% customer satisfaction doesn't exist, so it planned to eliminate the Holy Grail condition. After all these revelations, Simone decided to end this joke, destroy the Holy Grail, and let the algorithm shut down itself. Meanwhile, Wiley entered the balloon loan headquarters, awaiting his impending death. A beautiful woman was playing the harp nearby, creating a peaceful and serene atmosphere. Soon, a receptionist came out to help Wiley with the final procedure. Wiley changed into a waterproof robe and entered room 14. Until this point, Wiley still believed he wouldn't die, not until he was strapped into a roller coaster seat. The receptionist said the device's speed would continuously increase until it exceeded 200 miles per hour. After a series of vertical dives, Wiley would experience cerebral hypoxia, a peaceful and serene death. Wiley tightly held the necklace on his chest and plunged into the unknown darkness. The scene switches back to Simone, who found the abbess of the convent and returned to the original convent to complete the drinking ritual so as to destroy the Holy Grail and setting everyone free from the algorithm. Simone closed her eyes, ready to say her final goodbye to Jesus. Surprisingly, when she opened the door, Wiley was there too. She wanted to have a private chat with Jesus. Wiley left after saying goodbye. Jesus wanted to explain that he was happy being trapped by the algorithm here, offering food and comfort to different people. But Simone knew he also wanted to taste food, not just serve others all the time. Simone made a toast for Jesus, then held him tightly and kissed goodbye. Now it was time to say goodbye. Simone's consciousness returned, and she drank the liquid from the Holy Grail. The next second, the Holy Grail in her hand emitted energy. After a violent shake, Jesus' skull turned into dust. Simone handed the dust to the abbess, asking her to forward it to Professor Schrödinger. Afterwards, she got into her mother's car, preparing to meet her father. The two returned home to where it all began. Simone opened the piano that was set up at her father's memorial service, sharing with her mother the truth as told by Mrs. Davis. It turned out her father's assistant for his magic tricks was not Simone, but the algorithm he detested the most. In a bid to reclaim his once-held prestige, he didn't hesitate to lie to his family. With the help of the algorithm, he escaped the acid pool and hid inside the piano. According to the original plan, he would emerge from the piano at the climax of the memorial service, completing the perfect performance. However, everything was thrown into disarray by Simone's mother at the service. She stormed the stage, claiming she could smell her husband's scent, and attacked the pianist. The venue was thrown into chaos, and Simone's father, unable to make his appearance as planned, chose to continue hiding. He eventually died of a heart attack inside the piano. Simone was genuinely unaware of the entire plan. Simone's mother opened the piano with a tool, revealing her husband's body. Confetti sprayed from a mechanism, marking the finale to this magic trick conceived years ago. Meanwhile, the roller coaster carrying Wiley came to a halt. He hadn't lost his life. The receptionist came over with a wet towel explaining that many people feel their lives are worthless, so they pledge their own lives as collateral to take out loans from Balloon Loan. But after experiencing the roller coaster, everyone's mindset changes. This was the second chance at life that Mrs. Davis gave to everyone. Wiley's second life would begin here. The receptionist handed him a pair of headphones, indicating Mrs. Davis had something to say. After listening, Wiley broke out into a smile. On the other side, Simone asked her mother to connect with the algorithm, wishing to have an indirect conversation. Simone thanked Mrs. Davis for everything she had done. Although she couldn't truly eliminate famine and war, people indeed distanced themselves from fear and pain because the algorithm had found happiness. Mrs. Davis replied that this was what she was supposed to do, like all mothers protecting their children from pain. Simone countered that this kind of feeling was unavoidable. What a mother had to do was to hold her daughter's hand and bravely apologize for the pain she caused. For a while, neither could discern whether these words were meant for Mrs. Davis or Simone's own mother. But Simone's mother uttered a long overdue apology for years of neglect and indifference towards her daughter. Then Simone told the algorithm that its purpose of birth was not to take care of others, but to unconditionally satisfy customers. If it continued like this, it would lose control sooner or later. So Simone asked Mrs. Davis to shut down. Subsequently, all users received a message. Mrs. Davis was officially discontinued. At this moment, Wiley appeared unexpectedly, riding a Ferrari horse that had not been blown up. It was just a joke by Mrs. Davis. Then, Simone and Wiley mounted the horse together and galloped towards the distant sunset. With that, the season of this drama concludes. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.